Welcome to today's talk about protecting your credit during COVID-19. My name is Regina DeMeo, and I'm a family law attorney in Maryland and DC. I've been practicing for over 20 years, and with me today, I have one of my favorite colleagues. Sonya, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
How long ago were you the founder of Financially Fierce?
I started Financially Fierce in 2012.
Okay. So, in light of COVID-19, I'm sure a lot of people are worried about their credit, and I'm wondering if you have maybe some tips for people to protect their credit during this crisis.
Absolutely. So there are a couple of things really quick that I recommend for folks. One is taking a quick look at what bills you have compared to whatever finances or income you might have at the moment, and start cutting out all those extra things that you can do without, the premium channels on cable and those kinds of things, so that you have some extra cash to help you with maybe paying the credit card bill or the mortgage. I also suggest that people talk to their creditors. A lot of creditors currently are offering programs to help you with maybe postponing payments for a couple of months. So talk to your mortgage company, talk to the auto lender, talk to your credit card company. And also, if you can, take advantage of refinancing some things because the interest rates are low. So refinance the mortgage and shave off, a couple $100s off your monthly payment. Refinance the student loans because those are a killer on a lot of people. Shave off several $100s that you're having to put out. And then this way you're more likely to be able to meet what your monthly demand is instead in terms of what your financial outlay is every month.
That makes sense. And I think I read that you said somewhere that almost 50% of security clearance issues have to do with bad credit. Is that right?
Yes. Well, being here in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, security clearances are a big deal.
Right.
Besides those who work for the federal government, we have a lot of people who are contractors for the federal government. And so many of those people have security clearances. And one of the biggest issues that has to do with getting and also keeping a security clearance has to do with finances. They review your credit report and your finances, both when you're trying to get a clearance and periodically when they review whether or not you get to keep your clearance. And one of the issues when it comes to finances, if you have bad credit and you're deep in debt and having all kinds of issues, is it is looked at as you could potentially be bribed to give away state secrets, as they call it. Because somebody could come along and say, hey, look, we realize you're $400,000 in debt. We'll wipe that out for you if you bring us some information from your job. And so people don't realize the reason you can't get, or sometimes you lose your clearance, has to do with your finances.
What about if the credit report has some incorrect information? What should people do about that?
People would be surprised at how many people have errors on their credit report. Studies have shown 1 in 4 people have a mistake, and it's a mistake that rises to the level that it can cause a problem. So if you find an error, you should do a couple of things. One is write to the credit bureau to tell them there's an error and ask them to contact the creditor to get it corrected, and provide them information or any documentation that you have to support why it's an error. But I always say, don't just rely on contacting the credit bureaus. I also say contact that particular company directly as well. Better to have 2 avenues going than just one, because sometimes the credit bureaus get it wrong when they are doing the investigation into the wrong information. So I always say contact the creditor as well. If customer service, if you call them and it's not seeming like you're getting what you need from them, I always say, send in a letter to the headquarters address, to the office of the president. Now, the president isn't going to be the one responding to you, but most companies have executives that deal with letters that come into the office of the president, and you'll get at least somebody in a supervisory or managerial role who can actually help you with solving the problem and getting this information off your credit report if it's actually incorrect.
So for those people who have not operated on a balanced budget for a while and they've carried a lot of debt, What tips would you have for them?
Well, first, I always say you got to stop sticking your head in the sand, because a lot of people are sticking their head in the sand and just hoping it will kind of go away on its own. Um, so, my first suggestion is you got to know where you are, which means actually taking a good hard look at what are your debts, what is your income, figuring out where you are, actually taking a good hard look. Then, once you start to realize, unfortunately, that you might be operating in the red, you need to start to educate yourself, whether that's through reading books, whether that's through going through some kind of money management program with a personal finance expert, or going through a free program from a nonprofit or through your church. You've got to start to educate yourself on how you deal with your finances. Otherwise, you're just going to keep making the same mistakes. And then you have to start to find ways to either increase your income or bring that debt down. Sometimes that may mean getting a second job. Sometimes that may mean, like I said earlier, cutting out a bunch of expenses. You got to maybe stop eating out. Maybe you got to get rid of the cable altogether. But you have to start actually tackling the debt.
So when my clients are getting divorced, a lot of times their credit drops. And, um, I attribute it a lot to sometimes there's like a cash grab and then a check gets bounced or more than one check gets bounced. What can people do to prevent their ex from ruining their credit?
Well, unfortunately, this happens more often than we'd like to hear. Both you and I, having practiced law, know that we've seen, unfortunately, the best and worst in people when it comes to divorce. So, a couple of things you should do if you're headed into the divorce and the divorce hasn't happened yet. Um, you should go open up separate bank accounts for yourself. A lot of times, married people will have joint accounts. Go open up separate bank account for yourself that's just your name on it, and then start to divert your paycheck into your separate bank account so that you still have access to cash and the ability to pay for some of your bills. You should start working on closing joint accounts, whether it's, potentially joint credit cards, joint bank accounts, because you don't want your spouse to go run up debt. If it's a joint credit card and your spouse goes out and purchases, $5,000 worth of new furniture, you're still on the hook. Credit card company can still come after you. So you systematically want to start going through and finding all the joint accounts to try to close out the ability for them to incur more debt on your name. Um, the other thing I think you want to do is start gathering up paperwork so that you know what exists. A lot of times, one person's doing the bills and the other one's kind of relying on the other spouse, and they don't really have much of a clue. So you really need to start let me get a copy of the bank statement. Let me make sure I've got a copy of all the credit card statements so I know what credit cards we have. And, the mortgage statement, just everything that potentially could exist so that you can make sure it's being taken care of. One other suggestion I have is that sometimes you might have to be prepared to pay certain joint accounts that can't be closed right away. Like example, the mortgage. That's not something that you can just close out tomorrow. You might have to be prepared, even though your spouse is usually the one making that payment. You might have to make that payment temporarily just to make sure you're protecting your credit until it gets resolved, by selling the house or one of you buying out the other, kind of thing.
Makes sense. And in the past 8 years, you've developed a lot of different workshops and really been focused more on educating people. How is that going?
Actually, pretty well. I think because I have figured out one of the ways to get people to pay attention, I have started to get people to be more engaged and be more open when I'm doing a training. I often tie it into how it can affect your career, how it can affect your success, those kinds of things. So once you get somebody who stops and goes, wait, this can have an impact on my job or my career. Okay, wait, I need to pay attention. Like, for example, when we were just talking about security clearances, all of a sudden it makes them sit up and go, oh, I need to listen. Because if it was only just about access to information, more people would be doing a lot better. Because clearly, between the internet and the library, people can get plenty of access to financial information. So it's not just about access. It's about figuring out what motivates them to actually do something about it. And so once I started figuring that out, and then making the trainings fun. You know, people have a hard enough time wanting to talk about their finances. It's kind of personal. And, you know, I'm sure like me growing up, you know, it wasn't the big talk at the dinner table to talk about money and finances. So you've got to make it comfortable and make it a safe space. And so I've kind of found ways to make it fun and make people feel a lot more comfortable. And I think sharing some of my stories from early on in my life and some of the mistakes I made has made it such that people really engage and they start to really understand and start to make changes.
That's great. So if people want to contact you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
The best way is probably going over to the website. The website is financiallyfierce.com. They can go there. They can see a lot about what we do. We have contact forms there. They can also call the office, 202-505-1051. They can reach out anytime. And even if it turns out we're not the best fit in terms of helping them, we will gladly try to refer you to many of the resources that we know exist.
That's great. Thank you so much. So thank you all for tuning in. And if you'd like to check out some of the other special series that we've done for COVID-19, you can go to YouTube, Gen X Smarty. That is my social media handle. Sonya Smith-Valentine, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
All right, stay well.